tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Assemble a grab-and-go bag for your household with the essentials that you'll need if you're asked to evacuate.
A plea to prepare, the warning to some British Columbians to brace for flooding. Also,
why would we take our most productive farmland and pave over it?
concerns over food security with fertile Surrey farmland vulnerable to industrial development. And a mysterious disappearance in English Bay. Search and rescue crews scour the water after a rental boat is found without its driver.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. We begin tonight with a warning to prepare. People living along the Fraser River between Hope and Metro Vancouver could see water levels overflow, threatening their homes. Zara Premji is looking at why.
Wet weather, it's not unusual for the province this time of year. But even for BC, the cooler, rainier spring has forecasters watching the skies and mountain peaks extra closely.
So in a typical year, we might have melted half of the snow. We're seeing that this year, only about 20% of the snow that we've accumulated has melted.
The province has learned the hard way to brace for flooding. While Thursday's conditions are different from November's atmospheric river, experts say it's essential to prepare.
Over the next few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, we are expecting that with these rivers full, we are very much vulnerable to any kind of extreme weather pattern that might emerge.
There is one flood watch warning in effect for the Liard River in the northeast. Over the weekend, an evacuation alert was issued near Terrace for nearly 300 people. As the Skeena River rose, no evacuation orders have been issued.
For those at risk of flooding, I encourage you to plan now. Assemble a grab-and-go bag for your household with the essentials that you'll need if you're asked to evacuate.
In any go bag, essentials should include medications, copies of important documents, and basic clothing at the very least. Emergency management also says clear the gutters and storm drains in your neighborhood. And remember, never drive through flood water.
Reach out to your friends and family who will be able to support you if you are evacuated so that local accommodation is available for those that have no other option.
The advice also applies to people living near the Fraser River in areas from Hope to Metro Vancouver.
Being aware that risks exist and preparing for them.
More rain could be on the way Friday afternoon, and the next 2 to 3 weeks are a critical time when experts say the rivers could fill up and even overflow. The experts do also say it's too early to predict, but they are watching closely. Zara Premji, CBC News, North Vancouver.
Let's bring in a very wet meteorologist, Johanna Wagstaffe. Joe, safe to say this latest storm is raising flood worries?
Yes, Anita. Yeah, we've seen a lot of rain today. Rainfall warnings are not in place, notably across British Columbia, because we're not quite hitting warning criteria for Vancouver, but this is certainly unusual for June and will likely break a daily rainfall record for rain, with over 25 millimeters at YVR. Take a look at the flood watches and warnings and high stream advisories in place. The rainfall warnings really telling the picture. I'll show you that board later on. The atmospheric river came barreling in early this morning, and it's going to continue for the next couple of hours. You can really see that surge of moisture starting to see an end. If you look up towards Port Hardy, we're seeing the top edge of that front starting to sink south. So, Anita, tomorrow actually looking much drier than earlier forecasts. In fact, have a good looking weekend. We just have to get through, I'd say, another 10 to 20 millimeters, and rivers will continue to respond over the weekend. I'll have more on that board a little bit later.
Okay, thanks, Joe. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
There are food security concerns being raised over a piece of farmland in Surrey that's vulnerable to industrial development. Some say it's the most fertile land in the province, if not Western Canada, and the parcel alone is responsible for a huge chunk of our vegetable supply. Earlier this week, I went to the farm to hear the worries. Now, the 220 acres is not protected by the Agricultural Land Reserve, but farmers say that's a historical oversight and a mistake that should be fixed before it's too late.
It's just sand, as you can see, no rocks. It's easy to work with.
If you like fresh BC-grown vegetables, there's a good chance you've eaten from this field.
It produces the earliest crops every year. first potatoes, first carrots, first cabbage. It allows us to jumpstart the market and repel Mexican and U.S. product.
Ron Heppel and his family have been leasing the land from the federal government since the 1970s. It sits on 192nd Street in Surrey's Campbell Heights neighborhood and yields 30 to 50 million servings of produce each year, enough to put a serving on every Metro Vancouverite's dinner plate for 2 to 3 weeks. The parcel is surrounded by warehouses erected over the years as farmland sold for hundreds of millions. The feds say they too are in the process of divesting this property, all designated industrial as part of Surrey's larger community plan. But Heppel hopes that will change because of how unique it is.
It's sand. There's no stones in it. We've removed the stones. There's good water here, great drainage. It's elevated, and so it has a microclimate.
Allowing for regenerative farming, a key recommendation in climate change resiliency.
Why would we take our most productive farmland and pave over it and put concrete on top of it?
Murray Driediger with BC Fresh knows the pressure for industrial land, but says losing this amount of crop production would be detrimental to the province's food security.
When the supply chain gets broken, countries tend to pull their exports in. They tend to take care of themselves. Nobody else is going to help us.
Experts say conflicts between agriculture, residential, roadways, and industrial are nothing new to the area because there's no space left.
I'm very sensitive to the idea of preserving farmland, particularly fertile farmland. You know, it is in this particular case running up against an area where we're not talking about sprawling single-family homes. We're talking about land that would provide jobs.
Somerville agrees the province could swap the land into the ALR, taking a less fertile piece out, but says it's complicated. And the feds stand to cash in upwards of $700 million. For now, it's wait and see for these farmers who don't know when they could be planting their last seed. Well, after a search through day and night, rescue crews are no longer looking for a boater who went missing in English Bay. Their boat was found adrift near West Vancouver yesterday. And as John Hernandez reports, the investigation has been handed over to police, who are now calling it a missing persons case.
After a wet and hazy day searching through English Bay, search and rescue crews have returned empty-handed. The 24-hour search for a missing boater has been called off, as the Joint Rescue Coordination Center says it's unlikely he survived. The rescue effort kicked off on Wednesday when a Parks Canada staffer found an unmanned boat adrift near Point Atkinson in West Vancouver. The keys were still in the ignition and the throttle pushed forward. Today, more details emerged about the boater. Police confirm he was a 46-year-old man from Surrey who rented the boat from Granville Island around noon on Wednesday. He went off toward Bowen Island alone. In BC, you don't need a boating license to rent a boat for a day. He was supposed to return the boat around 3 p.m., but he never came back. The VPD says it's unclear just how he ended up going overboard. The Joint Rescue Coordination Center, which included crews from the Coast Guard, suspended its search just before 2 p.m. today after it canvassed the waters between Point Atkinson and the Lions Gate Bridge. A supervisor told me that given the exhaustive search, there is no reasonable expectation that the man is still alive. The Vancouver Police Department has taken over the investigation and is calling it a missing persons case. Anyone with information or who may have seen the boat is asked to contact police. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
New numbers are offering a concerning look at the changing face of the toxic drug crisis in this province. 161 people were killed by toxic drugs in April, an average of more than 5 deaths per day. While men are still being killed in disproportionate numbers, deaths of women are on the rise. 26% of all victims in April identified as female. The new data from the BC Coroner Service also shows regional shifts in drug deaths, with the Coroner Service saying the island and northern health regions have been especially hard hit. The death rate already higher than that of 2021. A house fire has claimed the life of an elderly Nanaimo man. Crews were called to the property on Quill Drive after a neighbor noticed a beeping smoke alarm. The cause of death is still being investigated, but Nanaimo Fire says the man was in a hospital-style bed, had mobility issues, and was alone. The cause of the fire has yet to be determined. To New Westminster now, where a Dutch police officer addressed the jury in the trial of the man accused of sexually extorting BC teen Amanda Todd. The investigator is a specialist in computer forensics and is appearing via video from the Netherlands. He is the first in a series of Dutch witnesses expected to testify at the trial of Aiden Coban. Coban was extradited to Canada in 2020 to face this trial in connection to the online harassment endured by the Port Coquitlam teenager, allegedly starting in 2009. The Crown is arguing devices tied to Coban contained files linking him to accounts used to extort Todd. He has pleaded not guilty to 5 counts, including possession of child pornography, child luring, and extortion. Amanda Todd was 15 when she died by suicide in 2012. Well, there will soon be fewer places where you can donate and recycle old clothes in BC. At the end of this month, Return It will stop accepting textiles at 55 of its depots. It says this comes after the Salvation Army ended the partnership. While there are still many other places to donate clothing, most want items in good condition, whereas Return It accepts all types of clothing. Sustainability advocates say the closure could lead to more clothing ending up in the landfills.
Because Return It had many different locations all over the city and lots of marketing. Folks knew, and it was accessible to them, knew where to take it. And now without that in place, although there are a lot of other places they can take them, they might not know and will be faced with the decision to throw it in the garbage.
Blenkhorn says the best way to minimize clothing waste is to reduce what you buy, repair what you can, and buy better quality. Anyone looking to recycle clothing after June 30th should head to Metro Vancouver's recycling website for drop-off locations. Well, just in time for Pride Month, the Vancouver School Board has unveiled a new rainbow staircase leading to its main offices near Broadway and Granville. Each step is painted a different color of the Pride flag, chosen to represent the diversity that exists within the school district. A crowd of students and educators gathered for the unveiling to celebrate.
As you can hear from the kids, a very exciting day, and it shows our commitment to having an inclusive, our commitment to an inclusive district. As we have the stairs painted coming into the building, it's a reminder to us about how we do our work.
One of the board's student youth groups worked to make this happen, saying they wanted to highlight the district's commitment to having safe and inclusive places to learn. Vancouver City Council will be voting on the future of the contentious Broadway plan, but with more than 40 amendments up for debate, there will likely be no decision tonight. The housing development strategy along the busy corridor is tied to the SkyTrain extension already under construction. Changes could bring housing for up to 50,000 people along Broadway between Clark Drive and Arbutus Street. The City of Vancouver also has decided to make drinking in public plazas permanent. After what it considers a successful pilot over the past 2 summers, the city says it's ready to designate 6 plazas as permanent water holes. Starting next Wednesday through October 16th, you can drink openly at these spaces. The city says it will support local businesses as they try to recover from COVID setbacks. Well, if you're trying to get your hands on certain products, you'll be very likely have to wait, from fridges and sofas to car parts and patio furniture. What's delayed and why? Coming up. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. Well, Ottawa says it's working on a plan to alleviate the delays facing travelers at Pearson Airport. But according to one former airline industry insider, the problems may get much worse before things improve. Greg Ross has more.
This year, it's supposed to be 3 to 4 times bigger than they were in 2021.
Duncan Dee is the former chief operating officer at Air Canada. He says after being grounded by the pandemic for so long, people are itching to travel again this summer.
You've got Canadians who have been planning this particular holiday for 2 years.
If they're flying out of Pearson, they may need to prepare for long lineups getting through security. Some travelers we spoke to today were pre-warned about these issues by their airlines.
I got a message to arrive a lot earlier than normal.
Just the check-in notice from Air Canada said leave lots of time.
The government says they're beefing up the workforce to alleviate the problem.
We are adding additional CVSA officers. We're also adding additional CATSA officers.
They've hired 400 new airport security agents at Pearson who are expected to be trained and in place by the end of the month. But Dee says the government knew about the problem months ago and should have had them in place long before now.
When the government decides to put brand new rookie screeners on the screening lines at the start of the peak, it's a recipe for disaster.
Many international travelers flying into Pearson have experienced huge delays as well.
Customs was about 3 hours, got through, flight canceled from Toronto to Boston. All right, at this point now I go and I see there is a 400-person line.
Former NHLer turned podcaster Ryan Whitney took to social media to complain about the issues he had connecting through Pearson last week. Dee says these issues are largely due to COVID protocols in place at customs.
What happens to an international traveler? They get to the officer, they've got to provide them with their vaccination certificate, they've got to provide them with their ArriveCAN QR code, and they have to determine whether or not they'd be selected for random testing.
Dee says screening at customs now takes on average 4 times longer than it did pre-pandemic. The Minister of Transportation says they're working to ease some of these delays.
International travelers who have a connecting flight now are no longer eligible for random testing.
Some airport staff here tell me that because things get so backed up at customs, international travelers are often forced to wait on their planes, in some cases for hours, until things clear up at customs. And then when they're finally allowed off their planes, the lineups at customs are often very long. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
From cooking oil to cars, many things remain more expensive for Canadians if they can be found at all. Nisha Patel shows us the impact of lingering supply chain problems for retailers and their customers.
Jill Swartzentruber wanted to make sure her outdoor furniture store had enough stock to sell this summer.
There's a lot of construction going on and backyard renovation.
So amid global shortages and delays, she placed orders early.
We have had to take on another warehouse to make sure that we are set up for the season to be successful now.
The industry-wide delays have frustrated Canadian shoppers. While Kira Tone found what she was looking for here, she had less luck with a different retailer.
We tried to order a rug. They told us it was going to be $700 in shipping costs.
Soaring fuel prices are keeping those transportation costs high, even as shipping container prices are at their lowest levels in a year. And while there's less congestion at some ports like Shanghai, backlogs remain.
Anything that is coming in from overseas is really taking a much longer time to get here. Some say that if it's not on the water right now, then it's going to be a 2023 product.
Some supply chains are more tangled than others. The war in Ukraine has disrupted raw materials like sunflower oil. A semiconductor shortage continues to plague automakers.
And so if they miss the ability to get their hands on a very specific component, it can shut down the entire assembly line.
But some goods which were tough to find at the beginning of the pandemic are now more available, with some retailers overstocking.
So they're going to want to offload that inventory. They're not going to want to hang on to those items for very long. And so you should see those items go on sale.
Swartzentruber hopes to make the most of the season.
We have 3 prime months that bring in majority of our annual income. So those months are very important to us. So each sale does matter.
Despite that extra buying, some products have already sold out. More lessons in a year where business has been anything but usual. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
WestJet is making some policy changes after being called out by trans advocates for forcing passengers to identify as either male or female when booking flights. As Felicia Chandler reports, critics argue this is a human rights violation.
So I finally figured out why WestJet wasn't letting me check in online. It's because I'm trans.
Is Lloyd, a civil servant living in Halifax, recently chose WestJet for a flight, but they say checking in was an ordeal, all because they're non-binary.
I found online that this has been an issue for 3 years, and they've been called out multiple times, and they always give an excuse of it's Transport Canada, or, you know, by the end of this year, like, it's always just like, you know, we'll get to it. Well, it's been 3 years now.
Upon initially booking a series of WestJet flights last week, Lloyd noticed only male or female options were provided under gender. Lloyd picked one and assumed it would be a simple change at the airport, but quickly found out it would be anything but. WestJet staff would not let Lloyd board until using one of those two options.
They told me straight up that the reason I was being flagged was because I was trans. That was the only reason. There was no other reason for it. And just the treatment I got from the WestJet agents wasn't great.
And while Transport Canada says gender is needed to estimate the weight of passengers, a category for people with the X marker was added in 2019. Maddie McMillan, a policy analyst and trans person, says along with other community members, she drafted a call to action proposal for WestJet. She says WestJet has until the end of June to fix the problem.
We have a couple of law firms offering their services, looking at either class sort of situations, but any sort of way to lever towards a way that each party can hold their head high on an airplane. That's what we're driving towards.
This week, WestJet announced it is working to change its domestic reservation systems to include gender X by the end of 2022, and that they're working with the community. In a statement, WestJet says, "At WestJet, it is our commitment to ensure our guests have an equitable travel experience, and we owe a further explanation and apology regarding our progress on adding non-binary options to our booking and check-in systems." Lloyd says they've been consistently ignored by the airline in the past, and they hope to see WestJet stick to its word. Felicia Chandler, CBC News, Halifax.
The grand old lady is back, but the PNE's famous wooden playground has gotten an upgrade. It's not the only change at the fair. All the details next.
Now this is the way Vancouver is supposed to be. You know, we're the folks who lay back, work on our tans, and use the sound of the ocean to ease our troubles. What a great day to come down to the beach. There's a bit of wind, but there's not a cloud in the sky. Of course, if I come down here, I've got to obey a few rules. For instance, I can't start a fire, and I can't bring my favorite inflatable device. I'm not allowed to play ball, and Fido has to stay at home. And now there's a new rule: no electronic music.
It's just the fact that it's like the universal language music. So, you know, some people like the news, some people like whatever.
The problem is not everyone wants to listen to this universal language. So the Parks Board has decided Locarno Beach and Spanish Banks West will be quiet zones, no amplified music. To be honest, these two beaches are relatively quiet already. A lot of folks use headphones so they don't disturb their neighbors. And the radios we did hear today were kept low.
Yeah, I can see a place for it. Yeah.
So if the lifeguard came over now, and even though it's soft and he asked you to turn it off, how do you feel about it?
Turn it off. No big deal. I can live without music.
I think it's fair. I don't like having 15 different stations on going at once and all these guys with the big, huge speakers. I don't think it's fair.
And even the couple who like it loud will turn it down if you ask them.
Around us, of course, you know, we're not here to disturb. We're just here to take it all in our way.
Have you ever had people say, look...
No, if anyone ever did, of course, we'd listen to them because we're not here to,
Yeah, we're not here to, make problems for people.
Technology does need people.
So we wind up with another law at the beach. Most folks will obey it, just like the other laws. But a few are sure to forget. Remember, Fido's a no-no too, but at least he can't turn up the volume.
A heat wave in India has killed an estimated 100 people since March, and the struggle to cope with the hot weather is being noticed at one of the world's most famous monuments. The iconic Taj Mahal has seen a big drop in visitors as sweltering temperatures reach up to 46 degrees Celsius. The country has been suffering under an unprecedented heat wave that scientists attribute to climate change. An extreme difference for us here, that's for sure. Rain just dumping and dumping, Joe.
Yeah, I think it's going to take me a while to dry off tonight, Anita. And for anyone else who has to head out, it is steady rain right now across Metro Vancouver, and we have a few more hours under the river, so to speak. We are tapping into subtropical moisture, not from the Hawaiian Islands this time, but from across the Pacific. Actually, out towards Asia is the source of this moisture that we're getting. Let me show you how much more we're expecting. We've already seen about 25 to 30 millimeters. Take a look at the forecast rainfall. This is, again, what's expected over the next sort of 24 hours. You can see the darker greens there, 10 to 20 millimeters, and then we'll run it through again, and you can see some steadier bullseyes towards the central coast, 40 to 60 millimeters. Taking you forward in time and getting you to the forecast tomorrow, 24 in through Kelowna. So still seeing some warm temperatures as well as a mix of sun and cloud. And 19 degrees up towards Williams Lake, 19 up towards Prince George, and a 22 out towards Cranbrook. So it's dry and warm in the interior. I think I also am watching the Okanagan Lake levels. I know we haven't seen anything surpass amounts for this time of year or records, but just keeping an eye on things that are a little high right across the province. Okay, getting you to your full forecast. Things are drying out. Saturday and Sunday, in fact, tomorrow looking mainly dry, a stray shower possible in the evening, and then we will be rewarded with this weekend forecast. A little unsettled for Monday and Tuesday, but all in all, just not getting the kind of rain that we are seeing today. And Anita, that will be welcome news once this atmospheric river sinks out.
Yeah, that looks really good, Joe. A lot of sun in there.
We deserve that. Just get through tonight.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
We've learned more about the cause of power and internet outages in northern BC on Tuesday. Turns out it was all triggered by a beaver cutting down a tree. BC Hydro says bite marks were discovered at the bottom of the tree that damaged several telephone poles and fiber cables near Houston. 21 customers were affected, while internet, phone and TV service touched customers from Kitimat to Prince George. Thankfully, BC Hydro says there is no evidence any beavers were harmed. While the weather might say otherwise, summer is not far off, and in Vancouver, that of course means the return of Playland and the P&E. The amusement park officially reopens for this season on Saturday with some big changes. This year brings a brand new multi-million-dollar ride, the Skybender, along with a massive refurbishment of a classic, the wooden coaster. The world-famous Wooden Wonder got a facelift with 12,000 feet of Douglas fir lumber being added to the structure. But there will also be some noticeable absences in the park with the retirement of two classic rides, the Music Express and the Crazy Beach Party. Okay, the Music Express. How many of us grew up on that ride, struggling not to squish our partner when we went round and round? That is a ride that I will miss, no doubt. That is it for CBC Vancouver News tonight. Thanks so much for watching and have a wonderful evening.